yeah, you were talking about having a great conversation and getting the personality, right? And I was reading in your interview that you had a lot of debate around how edgy you want a bot to be. And what I want to know is, what were both sides of the debate and how did you come to the conclusion? Because I tried Zobot. I really like Zo because I'm 22, it's like it talks my language. But like, if I say bruh, it says bruh back to me, and it's kind of funny. It's really funny. Anyways, I just want to know what both sides of the debates were, and how you guys came to a conclusion.
So we basically came to a conclusion by different products probably have different design centers, right? So, but it was hilarious because sometimes, I'm not 22. And so I'd always be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And they were like, what do you mean? That's like a Beyonce song. And I was like, what? They'd be like, or, that's so funny. And I'd be like, that just seems dumb. And they were like, so I literally, we were just laughing, right? Because it'd be like, it's English is many different languages, turns out, right? And different groups of people speak really different ways through conversation. So, probably talking to your mom, you've got to be like, okay, I got to she won't understand anything that I'm saying. I have to type out full things and, maybe even use capital letters, that whole thing. And, if you're typing to your friend, they think what happened to you? Why are you writing a question mark at the end of your sentence? And doing, I don't know, writing, why aren't you just, using more emojis? Is something wrong with you? So I think that English is really interesting, or just any language, that dialogue is so different if you're talking to your friend or someone that even for the same person. And, what is a joke between you and your friends is really different than maybe you and your brothers versus in school. And so I think we don't really think about that as much. It's a great, research or just opportunity for you because you understand that language, which is really the language of text and conversation, way more than we do, And so we just had a lot of laughs actually, because partly I was like, okay, I don't know, we just need to try it out with students and see. So I can't wait to see what people who've grown up with text, what they create, because I think you'll create things that are more native to the medium than, you might for your job within, some big company team or something like that. And just different groups talk different ways. I mean, a lot of our customers, like I said, are big companies and they don't want somebody that talks like that. They were like, that would be not appropriate. We don't want it sharing piles of poo and stuff like that all the time. So I don't know. I think it's just important to know your audience and be willing to make it fun. Because I think sometimes software is not fun. And I think that you should be willing to tell a joke or be a little bit unexpected, or, how you deal with insults, I think is important. Someone was telling me, I don't know if this is true or not. Her husband was yelling at her Alexa, and basically Alexa just stopped working. I don't know if this is true, so you should test it. And they were broken. She's like, I think you need to apologize. And they were like, no way. That's just crazy. So then they did. And she was like, that's fine or something. So I don't know if she was playing a joke on them or what, but I thought, okay, that's really interesting. How do you, because people, especially Americans, we have these myths in our society that Terminator, we're not like Totoro and the friendly little tiny ghosts. We're these man against machine. And so I think people, the first thing they want to do is mess with your software, how dumb is it? Or, they do all these mean things to your software. And you could just be like, and so you could just be like, well, I'm just not going to answer that.
Right.
Or you could just wait a little bit of time, or you could, sass, whatever. I just think that you should think about those interactions because people will do them. And if you don't have any response, then it's you think about that, right?
I guess to your point, a lot of the different nuances that we see, even beyond different age groups, I'm sure you guys saw quite a bit of different ways people are interacting with your chatbots, because I know your team sort of pioneered Shall Ice. And from what I understand, in those platforms like WeChat, they interact with them in a different way that some of us do back here in the US as far as how people interact with their sort of version of Siri. I've heard it's much more longer and conversational where they'll be like, how's your day going? You know, when they're talking to their AI. So I'm curious as what sort of like things that you guys had noticed as you guys had run that in China.
Yeah, I mean, we were very inspired by the Chinese team. They did it as a hackathon project and just sort of took off. And, you know, if you think of a lot of the chatbots that are sort of representative of big companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, they're fairly on the rails and they kind of give you an answer. You ask a question, they give you an answer. They're not really trying to create dialogue with you so much. And Chalice was like, hey, let's see if we can create an engaging experience. And so every week, I think the team would put out a new skill and they would just see is it interesting? So there's some that are really easy skills. There's this sheep counting skill and people just love it. It's, just 1, 2, 3, 4, you count sheep and it just remembers what number you're on, but, so people just are bored sometimes, I think, or you want to talk to something late at night when texting your friend, they would just be like, go to sleep. You're so irritating, right? But that's a lot of times when people check their phones and just, they would just like to, to check something out or talk a little bit. So I think that, the Chinese audience is also definitely different than the US audience. I think it's, well, for one thing, people just aren't as rude, probably because government-wise, that would be not a very wise thing to do. But there's just certain things you wouldn't say, which people say all the time here. But I just think it's kind of human to want to converse, share your secrets and things like that. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see how different countries use these tools. And so it's just kind of fun or just I think it's a little bit unpredictable, and that's what makes it so exciting. What have you seen that you think is really neat?
Oh, on our end, what have we seen?
Yeah,
really to the points that you're making are we're kind of seeing similar areas. I think it's really interesting that we're seeing an emotion, people building an emotional connection with software now, right?
Yeah.
It's not only efficiency. In a way, you can almost, it almost gets to a point, where you can consider it to be, a friend, and that kind of extends the relationship that you can have with software of just being a tool to being an actual assistant, somebody who can really help you in different ways. It changes the dynamic a little bit, and I think what stems from that, I think we've yet to really identify which areas we can make the best use of that of this platform, considering all the new aspects and that and all the different new ways that we're interacting with people. But I think it's really interesting to kind of explore and find new areas that we can really make the best of this new platform.
Yeah, because I think we're seeing on two sides, right? One is these very entertaining bots, right?
Right.
And on the other end, we see utilitarian purposes, right? So far I haven't really seen a really good marrying between those two things.
Right.
It's almost natural language processing is very well suited for some of the brand bots because you can carry on these conversations at end, right? Because I think there was that 50 Shades of Grey bot that got a ton of traffic. It's because people could keep having these conversations, right?
Right.
But then we see on the other flip side, these very utilitarian bots that, for example, line of business implementations, even in Microsoft Teams, right? It's hey, I want to upload contacts to Microsoft Dynamics, right? I'm a sales rep or something like that. So I see sort of two opposing camps right now. So it's sort of interesting, once we begin to see that marrying between those two things, where it's, we're beginning to see the lines blur. And I haven't quite seen that yet. I think especially in chatbots right now, we haven't seen that Uber moment or that sort of 10x moment where we're so surprised at the experience. I think it's very incremental right now. And, especially that's why personally, every time I use a new bot, I always try and break it. I want to understand what the exception handling is, right?
You're where? Yeah, exactly. It's I think people want to know what the boundaries are.
Exactly.
Right?
And I wonder, I don't want to go on a tangent on this one, but I always think it's interesting, how much of like what Chad says, when those two merge and they marry together, how much time will be dedicated by the development team to actually focus on it. It's like I think we can really see some parallels in what areas people what jobs people choose to work, right? I think if you are you might work a job that gets you a lot of pay and everything, but if you don't really enjoy the people that you work with, then that you might choose one that gives that you're looking forward to working at every day, right? In the same way, you might have a chatbot that is the most efficient chatbot in the world, right? But if I wonder if having something that kind of has that people feel more of a connection with, if they might choose one tool or another, maybe not something that they're directly thinking about, but they might just show some preference to one tool because they just feel more comfortable with it, and they feel more comfortable with the personality, they feel more comfortable with that interaction, and if, even though it might not be, the most, efficient one in the world, it might be something, it kind of adds another thing that we need to think about,
I think that's really brilliant. I mean, I think we always have to kind of push against the hyper rational, because I think that technology is like, everything's in a grid and, everything's got like property in and so I think part of the attraction around AI is this human part. Right. And I think with design, we are maybe a little bit more sophisticated in the way we design designs. So when something's beautiful and you're going to maybe go buy something at IKEA versus, wherever, just because it looks better. It's just people have begun to have a higher bar for their software. Like they want something that's designed to look good. Just because they're have a job that might be boring doesn't mean they want to use ugly stuff, right? And so I think that we don't really know what a beautifully designed conversation is yet, or dialogue is yet. Is the voice beautiful? Does it encourage you to talk more or less? Does it help you facilitate conversations that you're having in a group? Because I think sometimes, we think really one-on-one, but often if you think of how group meetings go and stuff like that, you're like, wow, this could really be moderated by a bot. So you would stop talking so much, or this person could be drawn out, whatever your goal is for your meeting, or hey, you have 5 minutes left, or just make it more fun. People are super tense. So I think we're just starting there, and it would be really neat to think about what is a language system that you want to be in more. And that's why I just love reading, because I feel wow, those writers, they know how to use language in a way that I'm not a good writer. I'm just wow, these guys, they know.
Right.
So we got to pull them into the conversation too.
Right. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot more higher end chatbot implementations are actually pulling in comedians and writers and linguists. So I think that, the study of UX per se, I think it's definitely going to adopt and evolve into this new thing that we hadn't seen before, with sort of more graphical user interfaces. So I think the research component is very interesting right now. And, I think although chatbots is maybe early-ish times right now, although I probably shouldn't say that, because I guess the first, recognized chatbot was back in 1966 with that sort of
Eliza.
Exactly. But I guess just looking at the research component, and then sort of taking that and comparing that to enterprises right now, we do see quite a few early adopters, leveraging chatbots in, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 right now. So I'm just curious to sort of, ask, are you guys seeing any specific patterns in use cases or industries that are showing sort of the most interest as being early adopters?
I think we kind of see two places. One where people are just interacting, like I said, their customers come to them, or maybe they don't like to come to them. So how do they help them just answer questions better, get more engaged, do kind of simple things, but not just immediately leave, right? Yeah. And then I think, and often those bots have names that kind of relate to their company name. Sometimes they have little faces, and I don't know if they're fun for people or not. I think we'll have to understand. And then I think, you kind of see the same thing a lot. We see it a lot for people trying to do that inside their companies, the organization, just mostly because I think the software, like I said before, just really hard to use sometimes. And it's interesting. Like I think a lot of brick and mortar companies have never put their best people like on the design of their website, because that was kind of like where people went if they had a problem, but they really designed like their storefront so much more and their branding and their shopping bags. And so now I think people are saying, wow, my customers are maybe entering from my website or my app, and that experience has to be as beautifully designed as like the storefront and, the place, those shelves that I put stuff on, and, the experience that you have waiting in line or whatever. And so I think they're starting to say, like, how could we have not seen this, right? Like, that's where people are coming, and we've got to make that our first priority. So that's just, I think, stuff that we're trying to see. But I don't think they're even, the ideas that you have are really great, because I love talking to you guys, because I think, we hear a lot of the really practical things, that problems that people face of implementing things. And I think we have to remember to keep it, like, why is it different? What is really going to make somebody love it?
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter if it's like enterprise software or, software for your company. Like, that's what's going to make somebody love your brand or want to come back or just enjoy something. And I just love, Julian, he'll send me stuff all the time of like, hey, check this out. This is really funny. Or, I think that's just memes, right? It's so much a part of internet culture. That's what people expect, right? Silly memes, something that's going to like surprise you, make you laugh, be clever in some way, maybe give somebody credit that they didn't expect. There's like all these kinds of things, I think, that come out of internet culture. And I think, this is just going to build on that.
It's just as much about how it makes you feel as what it does.
Right. How does it make you feel? Right. And
okay, so do you have to leave at 5 on the dot?
No.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I can ask a couple more questions. I just wanted to say, like, from my perspective, like we have so many different options of apps and bots and platforms and ecosystems. And so for me, it's like, okay, I can try that bot, but I'll probably just try it once because there's so many others to try. And it probably loses its utility value in a day or in an hour or so, right? Or even entertainment. It'll probably get boring in the next 5-10 minutes after I throw everything that I want to throw at it. So I think like what's really interesting, and I know like big companies are always thinking about ecosystems, but obviously like having a bot that really truly collects all the data and my identity, right? So whether it's my Facebook posts, my LinkedIn, my jokes, my comedy, my etc. And I know people are making this identity, this separate identity, but I think a bot that connects to that identity so that I don't have to talk to a new bot every single time. I think that is going to be at least a big game changer in my life.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I don't want to like keep trying new things, and then you said it before. A bot is only as smart as how much it knows me, right? So it just makes sense that I keep a bot like my buddy, like everywhere that I go, every new bot that I interact with, that I can gather that data.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting about that is that I think there's a large emphasis in chatbots right now and the technology, and people are really excited to leverage platforms, but I think we still have to remind ourselves that, it's a channel. It's this new channel that can be very engaging. But I think there may be a lot of expectations right now where it's like, let's turn everything into a bot, but then when we have to look at the UX, is the bot the best representation for this user experience? Or maybe it's a bot and it's a graphical user interface married together. Or it's just a graphical user interface. So are you seeing, distinctions being made right now in that case? Or do you see like this overwhelming just like adoption right now, not really thinking about it too much, let's just use a chatbot?
Well, I think everybody is trying to better understand the input that you have. So everything that you say, type, input, like often today in apps, it's just like letters. They're just like bits. And then you have to like tell it everything, right? And so I think people in a couple of years or even a year, when you input something, you're going to expect that if you're talking about a meeting, it'll pull your calendar. Or if you want to, get a ride, it might know enough to like know that you use Lyft and like, pull up that for you. Or remember some things about you, like you were saying with your profile. So I think or just remember like how to spell your name. It's like you don't have to teach it that every day, or the people that you interact with, your dictionary. Right. So I think you're absolutely right that your input, you want to get smarter, and it can be smarter if you have your profile, your alter ego, the thing that understands you, that you own, that can you could take with you. I love that. Rather than like, I have to build one for each company that I interact with. That's keeping my data in some silo. So hopefully you can own your alter ego, and that way you can let it share what you want to share with different companies, and then you take your data with you. You're not leaving it like for every organization that you interact with. That's like a brilliant thing. I mean, you should like write more about that, because I think it's a really great vision. And I think you're right. Like, we will be bad designers if we say like everything needs VR, or everything needs to talk back to you, because that can just be super annoying, right? That like I have a big screen, like use it. I don't need the big screen to like be giving me like this text back, or I don't want everything to be talking to me sometimes, right? Like I don't want everything listening and like interrupting me all the time as things I'm talking to it. So I do think we need to just be kind of real, right? Like and luckily we all have limited time, so we don't actually have time to, do everything. And I think, things will sort of, just think how much clearer it is a year. It's very different than it was a year and a half ago, right? And so I think it'll be even that much more different in a year from now, right? And so we'll just see kind of different levels of problems that people are solving. I think now is kind of the fun time, though. I like the messy time, because it just feels like
we could try.
Yeah, it's fun, right? Because you can kind of already see the future in some places, and in other places we'll be laughing and being like, oh my gosh, we thought that was going to be the coolest thing ever, and like, boy, were we wrong. We'll make some mistakes.
Of that, what is like the coolest bot that you've seen so far that was just like surprising to you, and you're like, wow, this is actually, maybe above and beyond some of the bots we've seen out there currently?
Well, okay, this is one of my favorite bots was this bot that Kik. Do you guys know Kik? Kik. So Kik, they had built this bot. It was a therapy bot. And one of the guys, they came out and they did this hackathon with us. So they were talking about it. I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. So basically what it did is so they said that they found that a lot of teens, even though they're very social, in Kik are very isolated. People are worried about getting a job. They're worried about, they talk a lot, but they don't necessarily confide with people a lot, and they're gaming a lot. So they're just they don't necessarily have the social interactions that people had before. And they feel like they're just seeing a lot of people who just didn't have anybody to talk to, I guess. And so they built this therapy bot. So basically you could ask a question that you had, like something that was really bothering you, and it would ask 5 people in the network to reply back to your question. And they had like they took it down, so I don't know if there was some issue or something, and it was just really cool, because you could kind of like, it encouraged you to be vulnerable, and you're anonymous, so people don't really know who you are. But I thought it was awesome, like to have some software that encouraged you to be vulnerable and like ask the thing that you really worried about, that you really couldn't ask other people sometimes. And then you would get these answers back, mostly from people who were like optimistic and helpful and giving you support, but just because. So I just found that to be cool, because I found like, wow, sometimes you think about, well, I don't really have anything that I want to ask anybody because, I'm so cool or something. But then you're like, oh, actually, crap, I have like this thing that I'm worried about, or this thing. And just being able to ask it was like so amazing to me. So I do think these systems can cause you to, just be out there a little, like take a little more personal risk yourself in like ways that you might not. So I just found that one to be super cool, because I thought it was surprised me about myself, maybe.
Social bots, bringing people together.
I think that's the interesting thing. It's just like every single time we see sort of a new platform, I guess, for example, you were saying this yesterday with smartphones, right? At first we start using smartphones, we put games on them, it's fun, but then we start leveraging the network of smartphones, right? And now we have Uber, and we're leveraging the accelerometer, and we're leveraging GPS. And I almost see that same thing with chatbots now, because I think what you were just saying, with that application they developed, now we're uncovering new applications to sort of bring about that just simply didn't really exist a couple years ago in regards specifically to that therapy bot. Because I don't think maybe that's something someone would have came up with had chatbots not really risen to the interest level that exists today. So that is really interesting.
Yeah, I think these human connections, like we did a lot of social software, so still like you probably have this moment, like maybe a Facebook moment or an Instagram moment where you're like, oh my, remember that moment? That was like, oh my God, that happened. Somebody did this, or they mentioned me, or I did this thing, like which was a little crazy, and it was just like such a good memory, right? It just surprises you if somebody you didn't know did something for somebody else or something like that. And so those are like those things which like you're like, wow, just reminders that like life is awesome or life is terrible. Oh my God, this horrible thing happened. But I just, I don't know. I still love that part about dialogue and conversation, that social part. So I think hopefully it like helps people connect more.
In reference to that, we made a bot for fun called Mori. It's from Memento Mori, Latin for reminder that you're gonna die. And it's called Mori, your mortality reminder. And you put in your birthday, and Ruben coded this up, and it would give you the average number of days you have left to live based on U.S. aging data, male, female. And after it gives you the number of days you have left, we have an option. It says, hey, look, you can send a note to yourself in a year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it was like, it was really interesting to see some of the, I didn't look at all through all the answers, but like some of them were super long, so like I had to see that. But it was interesting how much people were willing to share with a bot. That was very personal, but like it was cool how we could contextualize that answer or persuade someone to give that answer.
Right.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, I think people don't ask those kind of questions very often. They're so busy, right? That
you don't have much left.
Right. Not a lot of days. Example of that, just a reminder, make the best of every day. That's kind of what was the goal of that. That's kind of leading that conversation. And I think it's a really interesting thing, like you said. What data comes there, what people are sharing with these spots. How are they confide? I feel like they can confide in them, like a friend.